Administration under the Prophet. Introduction. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was not only a religious preacher, a soldier, a statesman, but also a great administrator. He presided over the Commonwealth of Islam for 10 years, 622-32 AD. The work done within that short period will always remain as one of the most wonderful achievements recorded in history. The achievements which he had shown in the organization of the state and in the foundation of an empire are really commendable. The sovereign power of the Islamic State lies in the hands of Allah, who revealed his will to the Prophet through the Quran. The laws of Allah, as enjoined in the Quran, was binding on all Muslims, including the Prophet, the head of the Islamic State. In matters on which the Quran was silent, the decision of the Prophet was regarded as final. In such matters, the Prophet was the sovereign. He combined in his person the dual functions of prophethood and sovereignty. But although his authority was supreme, the Prophet usually consulted his chief companions on all matters of importance. On his migration to Medina, the Prophet at first built a mosque there. This mosque, known as the Prophet's Mosque, Masjidun Nabawi, became the office of the Islamic State. It served as the prayer house, the office, and the court of the Prophet. He led the congregational prayer in the mosque as an imam and conducted all the business of the state inside it. He had to carry on a great deal mosque as imam and conducted all the business of correspondence. Letters and messengers had to be dispatched to the foreign rulers and tribes from there. The Prophet used to execute treaties and receive foreign embassies and tribal deputations in the court of the mosque, and from there, orders had to be issued to the governors and tax collectors. The mosque was the court of the Prophet, where he used to hear cases and settle disputes. His officials and writers used to work in the mosque. In fact, the mosque was his secretariat. During the lifetime of the Prophet, no office was built. The provinces. After unifying the country, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, divided it into several provinces on the basis of past history and geographical position. The provinces were Madinah, Makkah, Taima, Janad, Yaman, Uman, Najran, Bahrain, and Hadramaut. Madinah was the capital of the whole Islamic State, and the administration of these provinces was under the direct control of the Prophet. There was one governor in each province. The provincial governor was called Wali. He was appointed by the Prophet and was responsible to him for his works. He had to perform the same functions within his area, as the Prophet used to do in Madinah, except those in connection with the prophetic works. He was the imam of the congregational prayer, the commander-in-chief, the judge, and the administrator. Besides the governors, the Prophet appointed amils, collectors, over each tribal area to collect zakat, poor tax, and sadqah, voluntary alms. The Prophet himself acted as the qazi, judge, of Madinah. The judges of other provinces were either appointed directly by him, or the governors were directed to appoint persons selected by him. The revenue system. There was no central authority in the pre-Islamic days. So, nobody knew anything about the income and expenditure of the government. It was the Prophet who first established a central government in Arabia. He was the first who instituted a public treasury in Medina. During the days of the Prophet, the Islamic State had 5 sources of revenue, namely 1. Zakat, poor tax, and sadqah, voluntary alms, 2. Jizya, capitation tax, 3. Kharaj, land tax, 4. Ghanima, spoils of war, and 5. Al-Fay, state lands. In order of importance, zakat has been given the second place in the Quran. It is compulsory, farz, for all well-to-do Muslims. Zakat was levied on different forms of properties. It was levied on A. Animals, that is, camel, cattle, and other domestic quadrupeds; B, grains, fruits, dates, etc.; C, gold and silver; and D, merchandise. A certain minimum of property, and nisab, was laid down, which would make one liable to pay zakat. As, for example, gold or silver below the value of 200 dirham was free from this tax. The zakat on land produce was collected at 10% if the land was watered by a stream or rain. This tax on land was called ushur. A person had to pay zakat on his land when the yield from the land exceeded 5 loads. In the case of merchandise, and even gold and silver, a zakat of 21% was levied. Jizya was levied on the non-Muslims in lieu of military service, and for the protection of their lives and properties. The Muslims used to return the jizya in case of their failure to protect the lives and properties of the non-Muslims. In the days of the Prophet, every male member capable of paying the zakat was required to pay only 1 dinar per year. This tax was not new. Before Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, it was prevalent in Persia under the name of gezit and in Rome under the name of tributum capitis. Non-Muslims had to pay kharaj, land tax, for possessing land. The institution of kharaj, which was prevalent among the Persians and the Romans, first came into being in Arabia after the conquest of Khaybar by the Muslims. The Prophet fixed half of the produce of their land as kharaj. Weapons, horses, and other movable properties were included in the khums or ghanima. These articles, when left by the unbelievers in the battlefield, were taken by the Muslims. 4/5 of the booty were distributed among the Muslim soldiers, and the remaining 1/5 was deposited with the treasury. The latter portion of the booty was used according to the instructions of the Quran for the support of the Prophet's relatives, the orphans, the needy, and wayfarers, and for the general good of the Muslim community. The word al-fai was generally applied to the lands in the conquered territories which came under the possession of the state. There were certain crown lands under the Prophet, and the income of these lands was utilized for the general good of the Muslim community. The army. The Prophet was the commander-in-chief of the Muslim army. He took part in 26 or 27 battles and expeditions, but he himself led the Muslim forces in all important battles and campaigns, like the battles of Badr, Uhud, and Hunain, and the conquest of Makkah. The smaller expeditions were led by a military commander appointed by him. There was no regular army. When there was necessity of sending military expedition, summons were issued to the allied tribes and the Muslims in general to assemble for the purpose. At first, the Muslim forces were only an assemblage of small bands, but during the later years of the Prophet's life, they were turned into a vast army. In the first battle of Islam, that is, the Battle of Badr, the Muslim army consisted of only 313 soldiers, but in the Tabuk expedition, last campaign undertaken by the Prophet, 30,000 soldiers had taken part. There was strict discipline among the soldiers, and every one of them had to maintain high standard of morality. Breach of discipline was subject to rigorous punishment. Education system. Though the Prophet was an illiterate, he was an ardent advocate of the pursuit of knowledge and education. He always encouraged the Muslims to acquire knowledge. To encourage education, he declared, "The ink of a learned man is purer than the blood of a martyr." After his migration to Medina, educational institutions were established there under his initiative. Some of the Quraysh, conversant with the art of reading and writing, were arrested by the Muslims in the Battle of Badr, and they were released on condition that each of them would teach writing and grammar to 10 Muslim children. Thereafter, literacy and education began to spread rapidly among the Madanites. Madinah became the center of religion and education. 9 mosque schools were established in Madinah, and of these, the Mosque School of Kabbalah was the most important. The Prophet used to go there to talk and discuss with the students. The women were also taught along with men. The Prophet used to say that even the slave girls must be educated and then set free. In each mohalla of the city, primary schools were established for the education of little children. When Islam was gaining ground all over Arabia, the Prophet arranged to send mu'allim, or teacher, to teach the Holy Quran to the Bedouin tribes.